Zone, dropping photography knowledge all day long, right? Yes. I love that intro, you guys. Welcome back to another Kilo Bravo Delta Zone broadcast podcast. My name is Keith B. Dixon, and I'm back. I'm a long time back from Nashville. 800 plus people showed up to hear me talk about social media. I got to tell you, it was amazing to see that many people. It was the biggest crowd I'd ever spoke to, and from what I heard, they actually had to stop letting people in. There was a line waiting to get in. It was so amazing, I got to tell you. And then afterwards, oh my God, 40 people hung around afterwards, just to ask questions. And, I did some giveaways. It was amazing, to say the least. And just walking around the conference and people coming up to me and the tweets and the Instagrams. I want to thank you guys. If you're listening to this broadcast, I definitely want to thank you. I really appreciate that. And more importantly, it was definitely a confidence booster. I know you're probably saying, what? Yes, those are the kind of things, because in social media, typically, we never really hear or see the result. You kind of see the results, through statistics, but there's nothing better than people coming up to you and saying, hey, I really appreciate you. You've changed my life. I wish I could cash that in and, live off of that. I mean, I really do, because I'd definitely be the richest guy on the planet. So thank you guys. I appreciate that. Today, we're going to be talking about real estate photography and agents. Now, I got to tell you, I've been in photography for about 20 years now, and from day one, I was photographing interiors. And it was an industry that I was already a part of, and, making the transition wasn't difficult because I knew a lot of people in the real estate industry. So it was just a natural transition into that. And the thing that I want you to take away from this broadcast is real estate is, I'm going to call it a slow roll. Real estate photography is a slow roll. It's hard to get into because it's hard to connect with people. The pay, not so great in the beginning until you establish yourself. And I'm going to talk about 9 key points that I thought would be helpful and interesting to know as a photographer getting into this. So let's dive right into this. Let's go. All right. First of all, what is real estate photography? Real estate photography is basically photographing homes, whether you use a drone or you're doing stills or video. You're basically creating some medium for a realtor, some media. You're creating media for a realtor that they're going to use to basically promote that home. And most of the time for someone selling it. And you always want to show it in the greatest light, no matter what you're doing. So that's real estate photography in a nutshell. I specialize in interior photography, and a majority of the homes I shoot, the mid-range, is typically single-family homes. I do a lot of them, and sometimes luxury homes, but for the most part, I'm shooting a fair number of single-family homes, and I work with one of the top Keller Williams agents in Northern California. Now, here's the thing. That relationship has been ongoing for the last 9 years. 9 years. So working for this top agent, it's been 9. We've been working together for 9 years. I want to say we almost started our success, our progress to success around the same time. And with that, you learn a lot of things. Now, I do work for other agents, and I'm going to tell you that the experience is different. And those agents are pretty good, right? They're pretty good. Can't take anything away from them. But working with a top agent who you have a relationship with is the pinnacle. And that's where I think everyone should be. And I'm going to talk about how you get there. Now, I want to dive into something because I know some people are going to listen to this and then just dive off in the first 10 minutes or so, because they're only looking for the juice in the berry. They're not looking for the whole berry. They're just looking for the juice. And I'm going to tell you, you need the whole berry if you're going to rock with this. Now, here's the thing. Getting business is difficult because it's hard to get into a real estate office because they have so many vendors and people coming at them on a regular basis. So it's almost like if they don't know you, you really don't have a shot. And that makes it difficult. I think you'd be better off, if you're trying to get the business, getting to know one realtor and having them introduce you. And that's still going to be tough. And here's another reason why getting the business is tough, because each individual agent is like an independent contractor. Unless there's teams, you're gonna have a tough shot at it. And I gotta tell you, when you're working with independent contractors, generally the solopreneur, it's difficult to unless they're making a lot of money, they're not gonna pay you a lot of money. Trying to reach that 1% is difficult, and sometimes they feel like, you know what, I'm gonna give you a lot of business, I don't really need to pay you a lot of money because you're going to realize it over time. But I don't get it, because my need is for survival now, not over the long run. And I can't continue to provide great service on a little bit of money. So there's pros and cons to that argument, and you have to understand that. The reality is business is going to be determined on a case-by-case basis. And if I was to make any kind of recommendation, I would really examine any realtor that I'm going to work with and see and just look at how much are they selling, and what type of homes are they selling? How do they treat their clients? Are they only going to use you when they get a good listing? I would examine all of these things because it's going to help you to make a better decision. Are they looking over your shoulder? Or do they say, hey, go out and photograph the property? Or, do they make certain recommendations about how they see the property? Those are all things that you have to take in consideration. And this leads to my third point, because I want to talk about my experience. Now, I've been at this whole interior real estate photography thing for about 23 years. And I've worked with all kinds of realtors, from the Bravo TV series realtor on down to somebody just starting out. So my experience is very dynamic. And I'm going to tell you, the ideal realtor for me is typically someone who's going to have faith and trust in my style of photography and really understand it. That is my ideal client. And let me drill that down. I like to shoot straight lines. If the room looks small, show it as it is. I need the freedom and the latitude to do what I do. And that's going to be my ideal realtor who understands that. That's something you have to figure out for yourself. Do they like your style? My style is very clean, straightforward. I like clean staging. Staging just means if the property is empty and they hire someone to stage it as if someone lives there, like a model home, I like it to be clean. I like it to match the ideal and style of the house. Those are the things that I look for. So I like working with agents like that. And I got to tell you, it just makes for a better photograph and a better experience to the client. Now, as far as getting paid, square footage wise, if you look at what I charge per square feet for a single family home, I'm probably one of the most expensive. Matter of fact, the price that I charge, most of the time, an agent could get drone, video, and stills all in the same stroke. But here's the thing. Not everybody's going to be my client, and I'm not looking for everybody. And later on during this broadcast, I'm going to talk about volume versus high volume versus low volume. And it's all going to depend on you for the most part. So that's my experience. I'd rather get paid a lot of money to do the job that a lot of people would do a lot of for just about the same pay, and just doing a lot of volume. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in high price tag, high quality client. That's what I'm looking for. And if that client comes with volume, that's great. I'll take it. Now, I got to tell you, I know a lot of the photographers here in Northern California that make real estate images for interiors. And for the most part, they're charging super low prices. I've even heard them say $80. I'll shoot the interior for $80, and as high as $150. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, for $80, I can't even pull my bag out the door. I mean, it's just not going to happen. I mean, the time you spend in traffic alone here in the Bay Area is going to eat that alive. Not going to be possible. But in some parts of the country, that might be a real thing, where they're not going to get a lot of traffic in terms of people showing up for the open house. It's a rural area. I don't know. That might make sense. The thing that I'm going to tell you is you have to look at the circumstances of your business and the circumstances of the condition that you're going to operate in as a photographer shooting interiors and make a determination from there. The only thing that I'm going to tell you about pricing is look at your cost and what does it cost you to do that job, and factor efficiently from there. Set your price accordingly. So if you're in Manhattan and you're charging $150, $200, you'll probably never get any calls because people are going to know you don't know what you're doing. If you're in San Francisco and you're charging $120, people are going to take advantage of you. I can guarantee you that. They're going to give you the promises of, a lot of business, this and that. No, it's not going to happen. Trust me. Now, you might get an office. And let's contrast this because nothing is absolute. Let's say you pick up an entire office for $120. There's no guarantee that everyone in that office is going to use you, because realtors are going to use whoever they want to use because they're the one footing the price tag, unless you're getting paid from the office. That's the only way. And I know very few photographers who are doing something like that. They're probably pulling about $40,000 out of that one office, but that's the only office they have. And they're bound to that one office. $40,000 is not going to be enough if you live in Northern California as a photographer and you're operating as a solopreneur, entrepreneur, business owner. You're only making $40,000. You're only pulling it out of that one office. You're not going to survive very long, guaranteed. Not even as an entrepreneur, we have a different approach on taxes and the way that we do our taxes versus a person with a job where, they're just subtracting that money out right away. You're still going to lose. That's the reality. So when it comes to pricing, you have to think smart on your feet about the environment that you're operating in, and you also have to think about your cost. So, and how that cost is going to affect your bottom line. If you are lucky, and I'm going to say lucky enough to capture a realtor that you can establish a good relationship with, they understand what you do, and they're willing to pay you because they're making money, you're going to land in a whole different space. And that's going to become basically the threshold that you're going to operate from. You're not going to want to move outside of that because it is going to be a comfort zone. It's going to be where you need to be. And that's finding that one agent and then multiplying that one agent, 2 or 3, and working with them if you can. Now, another big factor in the real estate, I'm going to call it the real estate game, in the real estate game for photographers, gear. Now, I got to tell you, some of the gear that I've seen photographers make images with, I would never use in a million years. The minimum standard is a crop sensor camera. That would be the minimum standard. Crop sensor with a 12 to 24. That would be the minimum you should go into a situation with. 4/3, no. Anything less than 4/3, absolutely not. And I'm going to tell you, depending on the style of home you're photographing, is really going to warrant the type of camera you should have. So if you're here in Northern California, where, in particularly the East Bay, where homes and rooms are squared, mostly small. Homes were built in the 50s, the 40s, and some in the 30s. The rooms are super small. The closets are like boxes. I mean, it's ridiculous. You need to have the right type of gear in order to even make that photograph possible. And if you're using a crop sensor, good luck. I want you to pray, because you're just not going to have the angle of view that you need to show that property in a good light. You're going to be shooting from outside the bedroom just to make it work. And we have a tendency to, as photographers, starting out, to shoot from the corners because the realtors think, the room looks really small. Well, the room looks really small because you're not using the proper gear, number one. Number two, they want it to look as big as possible because, they want to show the property in a big light. But, it's not going to happen. I mean, I've used crop sensors. I used crop sensor for years. And I got to tell you, it was pretty difficult. The more you correct it, the less image you have. I want you to remember that. So as you're correcting that image, trying to straighten it, you're just chopping off the edges and shrinking it down even more. So out the gate, my suggestion would be buy a full frame camera. And if you're just aiming for the stars, get a medium format, because then that's even better. You can shoot at those f/22 f-stops and not miss a beat, f/32, and so on. But let me warn you, the price tag on most medium format cameras start at around $10,000, but it's unbelievable, to say the least. So as far as gear goes and your camera body, try to get in on a full frame format. And if you're in other parts of the country, let's say the Midwest, and the homes are just a little bit more bigger, you may be okay with a crop sensor, provided you have at least something around 12 to 14. I don't know about 10, kind of distorts a little bit. You might be able to get away with that on a crop sensor. I would just judge it on a case-by-case basis, but definitely if you have open space, you're gonna survive a lot better with crop sensor. But if you're in the tight spaces, it's gonna get you, like bathrooms and things like that. So, and in terms of lenses, 2.8 lenses, definitely 2.8 lenses. You need those professional lenses. The kit lenses and the consumer cameras, I mean, it just can't stand up to the dynamic range that you might experience in the home. And that dynamic range is mostly caused because, the time of day you actually have to photograph the property. Sometimes the agents want to be there with you to let you in, or whatever the case is. And, typically 11, 1, 12, 2 o'clock, those times all agree with the agents, because guess what? That's the time they can be there. That's the time they can let you in. So you've got to be able to navigate the light in a room that's coming in at 2 o'clock, and it could be casting, like hard shadows and bright light. Your kit lens and your consumer grade camera is not going to be able to handle that dynamic range. Even if you create exposures, because I know you guys are probably thinking, well, I'll just do an HDR, but sometimes the camera just can't render down those highlights. It's not possible, or they can't bring up enough detail in the shadows. And let me sidebar. I'm going to sidebar because typically what photographers will do is they'll go watch a YouTube video and say, oh, I'm going to bring some lights and light it up, and then create more problems for themselves. There's two approaches, and I'm going to talk about this when it comes down to style, and that's a big part of it. I'll talk about the style organically, artificially. Those are the two approaches, the two styles that you have to start thinking about. And I'm going to segue right into style just right now, since it's definitely next. We talked about gear, and definitely need a tripod. You can't do it without a tripod. I use a corded trigger, by the way. So I use a corded trigger that plugs into the port on the camera, and there's a reason for it. And it's mostly just a workflow thing. I have to charge a lot of equipment on a daily basis, and having a charger for my remote is not really a good option for me at this point, because I do shoot a lot of properties each week, and that would just be a constant battle of keeping it charged. So I use a corded trigger, and that's how I do it. So cam ranger, depending, if there's going to be some tight spaces, some angles I don't really understand. And I know you're probably saying, well, Keith, why don't you do the same for every property? Well, not every property deserves the same type of approach. So for instance, I'll shoot a totally vacant home. There's no staging, there's nothing in it. They just need photos for the MLS. Okay, no need to do it. But if there's furniture, unique appliances and things like that, I want to make sure it shows properly at every single step. I want to make sure that if it's chrome in the kitchen, I don't have highlights bouncing all over the place. So that's what I mean by that. All right, now style is a trippy thing. It's subjective, and for the most part, you just want the photo to look as clean as possible. Some people tend to pour the HDR on just a little too much, And if you're not familiar with HDR, it's high dynamic range. So you're capturing a low, a mid, and a high in terms of just tones. So highlights, mid-range, and then your shadows. And then you blend those together in a program like Photomatics, and there's other programs out there as well. I just happen to use Photomatics. People tend, from what I see, sometimes they just tend to take it too far. It just looks unrealistic. Although HDR has grown in popularity, it just works for certain situations. So typically my style of photograph is very clean, very straight on, very simplistic in terms of just what the photo offers. It's simple, straightforward, and clean. Style is something you have to figure out, and to be honest with you, not very many realtors and agents are really going to see that. They're just going to look for a photo that's pretty much well exposed, and I think that's the level of training that a lot of them have, unless they've been exposed to photography before. They're just looking for some clean photos. Now, straight lines, I've seen some great homes photographed with convergence and just all kinds of keystoning, you name it, I've seen it. And those are just forms of distortion, pin cushioning, not a good thing. Sometimes underexposed, blown windows, that's subjective. And it's subjective because you can blow out a window because maybe the house right next door has bars on the window, and you don't want that to spoil the picture. Is that fair game? Absolutely, it's fair game. They're going to see it when they get there anyway. But we don't want to detract from the photograph by showing a beautiful kitchen and then you look right out the window and see bars on the window, you know? So I'll make a judgment call based on that. So you'll see my photos, sometimes the windows will be just slightly blown, and then sometimes they'll be really clean. And that's just to bring a good aesthetic to the photo. I'm not trying to deceive the person, but I'm just trying to create a pleasant photo. And they're going to make that decision when they see the property in terms of what it means. So try to find your style. Go check out some of the other architectural photographers out there and see what they're doing and how they're doing it. Although I like Schumann, probably one of my favorites, but you know, he shot film. As far as trying to figure out, you know, where you want to go and how you want to shoot, I like Architectural Digest because it's usually pretty current, and they're usually just on time with the style of how a home is shot. So that's one of my gauges. And the other thing that I like to do is I like to cruise a lot of the real estate sites and see what people are shooting. I mentioned clean as a, you know, in terms of how I like to photograph my images. I like it to look almost surreal, 3D, realistic. I guess that would be, if I had to give a total definition, that's how I want my style of my photo to be. So clean, simple, almost high definition like. That's how I would describe it. All right, if you're gonna be in photography, and this is my 7th point, if you're going to be in photography, the thing that I'm going to say is you got to be in for the long game, because it takes a minute to develop a client base. Can you survive off of this alone? I'm going to tell you no. Can't do it. Not here in Northern California, at least, and starting out. It's not going to be a good business model to get after. You're going to have to do some other things while you develop this particular business. And the tough part about that is the flexibility, because you always have to be ready to go, kind of, you know, on a moment's notice in some cases. And a lot of agents will give you a 2-day notice, sometimes a week notice. But for the most part, I'm going to say on the average a 3-day notice. So you got to be in this for the long game. And that'll give you a chance to really develop the type of clients that you want to have, that I think are important to you surviving in this business. So you definitely have to be in for the long game. The long game is also going to bring you a better understanding of how realtors work. Now, before I was in the real estate game as a photographer, I worked for a consulting firm, a residential consulting firm, and we did construction consulting. So if someone was trying to they did a modification to their house or whatever the case is, and they were trying to pass the inspection for the city, we helped them with that. We did home inspections, we did light construction, and a lot of tract homes. So I was kind of piped in already to the real estate game and the ideal of you know, how agents worked. Now, the thing that I'm going to tell you is, in the long game, you're going to see a lot of different agents in how they think about things. Some of them, their ideal is, I'm going to get my cell phone, snap a few pics. I'm a photographer. I got a camera. I'm going to snap a few pics. And then we're going to put those in the MLS. That's their attitude. So it's almost like when you meet them, they already have a devalued attitude about what you're going to do. And you can't subscribe to that. You have to let them know that this is what you do. You do it professionally, you process it professionally, and you deliver it professionally on time. And the timelines are usually very tight. So that's when you start establishing yourself in the long game. Now, if you're in the short game, you're just kind of doing whatever they tell you to do, however they tell you to do it, you do it, and so be it. I mean, those are the two options. Also, are you going to be the type of photographer who approaches the property organically with using existing light, or are you going to be the photographer who's going to relight the property? And that's going to depend on you and your style. Now, Michael Kelly is, as far as relighting properties, I think is probably one of the best out there, along with Jim Doyle. These are probably some of my two favorite photographers that relight properties. And what that means is they'll go in and add light to a property, at a certain time of day, and just really give it that pizzazz and that pop that it needs. And I think on the higher end properties, I definitely do that so that my images can pretty comparable to what's out there on the market, plus my style. So yes, I do add light to photos. I do it probably 20% of the time, because a majority of the business that I do in interior photography is in the middle. And I focus on volume that way. Now watch what I'm saying. I focus on volume that way. So high price, high volume. And it takes a while to get there. So, and if you can find a client who's doing, 100 homes a year at those high price points, it's going to be good. It's going to be good especially when you couple that with other work that you do, like I do. So the photography brand pulls in a level of revenue, and the commercial brand pulls in a level of revenue. So I'm working back and forth between those two brands, and that's the long game. So you have to figure out, are you going to be a photographer that's going to add light to a situation, or are you going to be an organic photographer? And organic is just what I do about 80% of the time, which is go in and shoot with existing light. And I do, full disclosure now, I want to add this, I do use LumeCubes. If I'm in a situation and the lighting is just super bad, I will use LumeCubes to light the room. All right, and I'll put the LumeCube link in the footer of this podcast. All right. I talked about volume work a little bit. I touched on it, and that's something that you have to make a decision. Are you going to do a lot of work for a little bit of money? Because that's what it's ultimately going to equate to in the beginning. Now that changes over time. If you're like myself, I'll work for one agent. She'll do 100 homes in a year, and I'll shoot all those homes. Lucky me, right? Or you can do 200, 300 homes a year working for several different agents at a lower price point. Ultimately, they both come out in a wash, to be honest with you. The only thing is, as far as the price goes, you're going to work a lot harder. And I'm going to tell you, I covered for this one photographer who was on vacation, and for the price point and the amount of work that he was doing to maintain that account, for me, it wasn't worth it. There's no way I would do it. I mean, just the wear and tear on your vehicle and the amount of time that it takes to process those images. Typically, I mean, if you're smoking through it, you might be able to get through your images within an hour, 15 minutes, but I'm going to say 90 minutes top. So you figure 90 minutes on the property, 90 minutes on the processing. I mean, that's like 3 hours worth of work. How much do you want to make? That's something you have to think about. How much do you want to make for that 3 hours worth of work? If you're getting paid 150 hours, you divide that by $150 and you divide that by 3 hours, you're not making a lot of money. I mean, you're barely covering anything. So you have to think about volume work and what it means. plus the wear and tear on your vehicle is going to get you before anything, and gas. So you have to make sure. Quality of work is important, and we're going to be through this. Quality of work is probably one of the most important aspects on this total list. Your quality of work not only speaks to the type of image that you're going to provide to the client, but your delivery system. They have to be totally dependent on, the realtor is going to be totally dependent, and they have to be, on you getting those images back the next day. That's standard, is delivery the next day. So if you're shooting 3 properties a day because you're on volume work, and then you got to turn those images around, you're going to be up all night guaranteed. So you figure that's an hour and a half for each one on the processing, provided you get through it quickly, setting it up and then delivering it to the client. That's a lot of time. And if you're only making $150, for each one of those properties, yeah, that's a good day. But man, I mean, the hours that you're going to put in, so 90 minutes times 3, right? On processing, and the time you're out there shooting. And I haven't even talked about the wear and tear that you're putting on your gear. So I don't know that that's the way to go. I don't know that you can actually grow as a photographer, because it becomes rote, and you just do the same things over and over again. Yeah, you're getting a check, but you're not really growing because you're just seeing the same stuff all the time. You get, and I'm just saying this from experience, because I've experienced this. You get stuck in these ruts, where you can't even spark your creativity, because you're just, okay, let me shoot this angle, that angle, this angle, I'm out. Yeah, bank account looks great. Creativity is on bankrupt. So you have to make choices. All right, that's all I have for you today. I want to thank you for listening. I appreciate you downloading this podcast, or whether you're streaming it, downloading it. I really appreciate that. Every single person counts. So when you subscribe, I get excited. So I want to thank you guys for that. And also in the show notes below, you'll see links to anything that I've talked about, the LumeCube that I use, and any other camera gear that I feel that might be pertinent to this. I'll definitely include that in the notes below. Thank you for listening. My name is Keith B. Dixon. I will see you soon. Peace.